So welcome everybody. We're so excited to have you here today. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read a couple quick bios. I think that's an easy way to do it. And we're going to dive into the questions and get to kind of the meat of what we want to talk about today. But I do appreciate everyone joining us. So just to get us started, I'm going to introduce first to the panel, Jessica Wilson. So Jessica is currently a fourth-year litigation associate at Fox Rothschild LLP in Raleigh, North Carolina. She graduated from NC State in 2012 with a degree in communications, public relations, and UNC Law School in 2017, but I know her and she's very loyal to the Wolfpack, no worries. But prior to attending law school, she worked in the First Lady's Correspondence Office at the White House, and then as a junior account executive at Gibbs and Soul Communications. So welcome, Jessica. We're excited to have you here. And then next we have Haley Pickard. So Haley is a marketing specialist with T. Campbell, Dennis, and Gorham, addressing the firm's marketing and business development strategy. A motivated and adaptive legal marketing professional, she has a passion for helping people engage with law firms and attorneys in a meaningful way. As a professional, Haley's intent is to continue developing strong networks and building lasting relationships, which is one reason we wanted to invite her here today. So thank you, Haley, for being with us. And then last but certainly not least, we have Colin Beamer. So Colin serves as program coordinator in the Office of Student Leadership and Engagement at NC State. So in his role, Colin leads the marketing program, supports logistics of the office's various programs, and performs administrative and financial duties. So he graduated from NC State in 2017 with a degree in political science. So again, thank you all so much for being here. We are really excited to have you. And I'm excited just to go ahead and get some of the questions started. I feel like I've been talking for entirely too long. So wanted to go ahead and jump in. So just to start with, and this is sort of kind of going back to some of the slides, is just defining what networking kind of means to you. So when you think about the word networking, what does it mean? And then how do you find yourself engaging in networking? So workplace, outside the work. Jessica, we're going to get started with you.
Sure. So we had these questions earlier, and interestingly enough, my definition of networking is the same thing that Anna put up. It's more just making connections with people, making genuine connections with people. You know, we all go to these networking events, and you can tell the people who are there just to check off the box. Like, hi, my name is such and such. I work for blah, blah, blah. What do you do? And those connections aren't really going to go anywhere unless you are interested in that one person or that one person's business. But if you can go up to a person and say something genuine, personalized, you'll just get a lot further. It kind of has been my experience with people. You know, I went to a women in litigation event in Chicago, like a year and a half ago now. And one of the women that I met, she was from Louisville, and I had just been there for a bachelorette party. And one of the connections that I had made with her was, how do you pronounce Louisville? You know, as a native, how do you do it? Because I don't know if any of y'all have seen those shirts, but there's 7 different ways that people will pronounce it. And that was just a good way to kind of break the ice, you know, get her talking about herself and how long she's lived there. And then it just so happened that NC State was playing them, you know, in football that following weekend. So it was a good way also then to follow up. We lost. It was depressing, you know, but I got to email her and be like, hey, it was really great meeting you this weekend. Congratulations on your win. You know, we'll get you in basketball or something like that. So just making personal connections will get you a lot further than just being there and being a robot. So yeah.
Yeah, I love the words that you use, personal and genuine. I think are 2 really important things, because sometimes we think of networking being fake. And so I love that you kind of gave a really good example and used those terms. So thank you so much. Haley, what about you? What does networking mean to you?
Yeah, so very similarly to what Jessica said, you know, networking for me, it really should be genuine. For me, it's about, it means the opportunity to connect with people and to build my personal and professional brand. So kind of what you were talking about, it can feel a little fake when you say it like that, but it just means that I want to build up how people perceive me, both personally and as a professional. Just a lot of, you know, what you do working is, you know, selling yourself or selling your professional brand. And so you do want to build up those connections genuinely and engaging with people to just so you become the reference person for them. And again, it always is in a very genuine way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Colin, what about you?
Yeah, it shows up very much in the same ways. So I love how everybody's taking that direction from a formal and an informal place. I think both of those are equally important, even though sometimes I feel like we put a huge onus on the professional networking concept. I think it really is so much more open-ended than that, and it can be so much more involved in building your community. So for me, it definitely is similar in that regard. Some of the ways that it's shown up for me, though, in my professional life, like even with like search committees, volunteer opportunities. Working at NC State, there are tons and tons of departments in our student affairs unit. So we always have needs that need to be filled in other departments. So those are great opportunities for us to network with other people outside of our day-to-day working environment. And then the next time around when we need something, we have that connection already built and we can all rely on each other in that sense of community. So I definitely agree with everything that's been said as well. And that's kind of how it shows up for me.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So, Colin, we're going to go right back to you. You're on a roll. So, how have you found networking to be valuable? So, I know you mentioned sort of just kind of connecting with different people within NC State, but even personally or other professional examples, like what have you found valuable about networking?
Yeah, I feel sort of a couple of ways about like it's not about what you know, it's about who you know concept. But I'll say both my first and second professional jobs, I leaned heavily into the fact that I had an existing network to get those jobs or to at least make that connection and find out about those opportunities. So literally just from my time as a student, I had developed connections on campus. Those connections lent themselves to the individuals in both of those roles already knowing my talents, my skill sets, the things that I could offer in this position. So if I were to apply for it, they would already have that information sort of at their disposal. And that all has to do with those connections made both professionally, but also just that interpersonal, those little moments that you make connections with people, when you're going out to dinner together or you run into each other on campus, or I've heard the grocery store example is a great example. Like you never know where you're going to run into people. But those little moments really are, I think, what people remember above all other things. Like we all sit in tons of spaces together. We have lots of professional work to do. But what makes you stand out are those little extra components that you have when you're building that network that personalize you, that make people really interested and care about that connection that they have with you. So I credit both my first and second professional jobs a lot with the connection and network that I had established already.
I love that. And like I sort of mentioned, is like build your network before you need it. So you didn't make those connections because you knew you could get a job down the road. It just happened to work out that way, which I think is just a really good good example of how it can really help you. And Haley, I kind of think of you as like a master networker. So I know that you've seen value and have found it valuable to just make that an initiative for you, and it's even in your bio. So just kind of talk about how networking's been valuable to you.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to what I said about the building the personal and professional network. But, I really genuinely just get fulfillment from meeting and making connections with people. So networking is kind of something I really enjoy doing just because I really love talking to people and getting deep with them and connecting with them. So that's why I found it valuable, is because I've not just found, professional connections and people who I can refer to on a professional level in my daily business, but also on a personal level who I can, grab a beer with and kind of get a little bit more informal with. And so that's how I found it really valuable, is that for me personally, I don't think of it just as like finding professional connection. I think of it as finding friends who happen to be young professionals and professionals. So I think that's where the difference is for me and why I find it so valuable. Because you can never have enough like good, genuine friends, and always being genuine yourself. That really builds up with that. I think also what's really key is consistency. So not just spreading it really thin, but finding people who you really feel like you have a genuine connection with and going back and talking to them and not being salesy about it. don't be that automated message you get when you one time click on this Amazon ad and suddenly you see it every time. Like, don't be like that. But if you really enjoyed a conversation you had with someone, or you really liked what someone said at this networking event, get coffee with them. So I think that's what it is trying to have those key touch points, because consistency is really important with networking, because especially now networking is so easy and you can hop on a call with someone. So just having that constant touch points is really important if you want to build up your network.
Yeah, I love the consistency piece, but also to your point, like you can never have enough connections, right? Like I don't think it's like the more the merrier. It's not going to hurt you in any way. So I think that's something really good to keep in mind too. It's not like you just do it and then you're done. It's something that you just sort of work into, and it's just a part of who you are. And that genuine piece again, I think comes in. Jessica, what about you? How have you found it valuable?
So in my opinion, there's kind of like two ways of networking. You go to these networking events and you're all there for the same reason. An icebreaker that somebody came up to the table was like, hey, my name is Jeff. I'm here to network, right? And that was just like, everybody laughed and everybody was like, yes, me too. We're all here by ourselves. And that's been great. But, some of the most valuable experiences that I have had is meeting people like through work. I do civil litigation. So we have found, we have opposing counsel in 99% of the situations. And there are just some attorneys that I've just really hit it off with. We have bonded over the craziness of our clients. We have both been in the same situation where we're like, there is just no way this person is in their right mind. And, obviously that's just between the two of us, but it got to the point where one guy was like, if you get called in front of the bar and I get called in front of the bar, I will promise to vouch for you, because there's some of the things that these people are asking us to do are so out there that like, there's just no way. And, it was like, when we were done, we're going to go grab a beer. And that was going to be, our celebration of just like being over these people. But I have gotten some of the best work from him too, because, our firm has a South Carolina office and they needed local counsel. So now every time that they need somebody in South Carolina, it's not me, but I was able to outsource it to somebody else in the firm. We get that work. So I got this personal relationship with this guy. We bonded over the craziest thing that you would never expect to bond with somebody with, but also that brought in work for me. And, as an attorney, and Haley could probably speak to this much more, part of the role that they never tell you in law school is business development, and business origination is almost just as important as, good work product. So having good work product, but making those connections with the strangest allies that you'll ever have, I think has been really valuable for me. And it does take the pressure off, because you're not there to network. You're just there to be respectful and help your client. And, part of helping your client is talking to opposing counsel and just trying to get on the same page, and you catch more bees with honey than vinegar, or whatever the saying is. So just being nice and being genuine and connecting with people in all different situations has been, I would say, almost more valuable than some of the networking events that I've been to.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I love the examples. I think it's helpful for us just to sort of hear about how it sort of played out in your world. So one thing that I want to kind of touch on, because I know last year was very unique. 2020 was a strange year for all of us. So I know that the virtual space has just been something that we've had to get familiar with. So I don't know if anybody's had a lot of in-person events in the past year. I know I haven't. Pretty much everything has been virtual. So I'd love for you all just to kind of talk about your experiences with virtual networking. And I do want to get to Kathleen's question, but before we get to LinkedIn, I just want to talk about just kind of general virtual networking first, and sort of how you've pivoted to be able to do that, what it's looked like for you within this past year. So we're going to kick it off to Colin.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. I will be the first person to admit that I've found virtual environments to be challenging. I don't think that's like an uncommon experience with most people, especially in the work of student affairs. We go from most of our work is in-person programming when we're in non-pandemic times. And so the vast majority, therefore, of networking in our environment for students in particular is the in-person experience that they get either between each other or with faculty and staff that they have the opportunity to work with. So an example of this is we have a leadership development program that operates out of our office. And we've had to go from a very engaging in-person workshop series that's 10 workshops long. Students get the opportunity to work together with each other, create connections in that environment, and then also to, like I said, make those connections with faculty and staff. And to do that to overnight kind of flip that into a virtual environment has been exceptionally challenging. We've seen that in other programs as well. So one of the lessons, I guess, that I've taken away from this, or things that I think that people could be focused on, is if we're forced to be in this virtual environment and there are challenges to overcome, there are some like key tips like that we'll talk about a little bit later. But I just feel like some of the biggest things that we can do is just to try to stay engaged, keep showing up, and keep asking good questions whenever we are in those spaces. It takes a lot more focus and energy to be present in virtual spaces than it does just to be naturally together in a space, and that's exhausting. I even read a study about like the fact that we're in a Zoom meeting and you can see yourself on the screen actually causes you to have to focus harder than you normally would, which is a weird facet that I didn't even consider when we moved into the virtual environment. But there's some serious like psychological things at play that are causing it to be harder for us that are out of our control. So what parts of our experience do we have control over that we can sort of accommodate and try to bolster in order for us to make those better networking experiences possible in the virtual environment? That's talking in a very generic sense, but I know we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of that. So, but that's been my experience.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, because I think in 2020, there were so many things out of our control, right? And so like, what is in our control? And so I think that's something really important for us to keep in mind, and just sort of kind of embracing the world that we are currently living in. And I think, Haley, you even mentioned like some aspects being easier. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about the virtual networking space and how you've been able to navigate it.
Yeah, so for the last year, mine has looked a lot like virtual coffees, virtual grab a coffee at 5 p.m., which means actually like virtual, probably just drink my water and eat dinner, and networking over LinkedIn. So Kathleen, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, it stinks. Networking over your computer isn't as fun. You know, when you go into a huge webinar or huge networking events, it's not as easy, especially because there's either you're going to talk all over each other or no one's going to say anything, and then it's just awkward. But you know, for me, it's just been, you know, you get the opportunity, especially now, if I go to a big networking event and I see someone, like I'm very involved in young professionals with the Raleigh Chamber, which is a plug for that. So if I go to that and it just someone makes an offhanded comment or just someone looks nice, I keep their name in mind and I immediately look them up on LinkedIn, and then I friend request them. I would say, hey, I saw you at this, you know, young professionals thing. Do you want to grab a coffee? They don't always have a similar job to me. They sometimes just never do, but they just look nice. They look like someone who I would want to grab a coffee with and get to know. So that's kind of what I do, is that that's how you do it. You know, I do the virtual coffees, but that's how I meet people also, is I just go to these big networking events. So I definitely encourage that. They may seem a little unpersonal, but you can make them personalized because you can take that opportunity to reach out to someone later. I really like also the virtual coffees because before you would have to, you know, set aside time and you would have to drive there, and, you know, it would take up 2 hours of your time. That's 2 hours. I think, speaking in attorney speak, that's 2 hours of billable time. And that's just, you know, and we can't always spend that. Now you can set up a 30-minute Zoom call. You can hop on really quick. Yeah, what you have to, and what I encourage everyone to do is that if you are doing that, if you're not doing a phone call, I also encourage phone calls, but if you're doing it over Zoom, make sure everything else is minimized. You really have to be engaged. Like I said, you can tell if I'm not actually looking at the screen or if I'm actually like reading an email. I was listening to this podcast and it was saying how, you know, you can't multitask. You're not actually doing two things at once. You are either paying attention to the Zoom call or you are answering your email. So really you have to focus. But I think the fact that it's just so much easier to hop on a 30-minute call with someone really adds to the ease of it, but also people are just a lot more relaxed. I mean, we all know that we're business on top and relaxed on the bottom. We all know that's what's going on right now. So I think that's what really adds to this whole virtual environment. Yeah, it stinks. It's the reality of the situation, but I think it also adds this fun layer to it that we can take and use to our own advantage. Again, with LinkedIn, I have no shame and I will literally LinkedIn anyone. I've looked at Colin and Jessica's and I'm probably going to friend them after this, just because I think that, and I'll probably get a coffee with them after this, because I think that LinkedIn is such a great tool because it is, it can be utilized in a professional way, and it should be. It should not be a replacement for Facebook, but it's also a really good tool just to say, hey, I saw you at this thing and I'd really love to grab coffee. Or, hey, it looks like we have something in common. I would love to grab coffee. So that's kind of how I utilize LinkedIn.
I think that's awesome. So I'm just curious, Haley, do you have any goals for how many people you want to reach out to, or is it just this person looks nice, I just want to talk to them? Is it just something that you just want to continuously meet with people? And then how do you keep up? Because you just mentioned a lot of people that you have reached out to recently about just grabbing coffee. So would love to hear sort of after what happens.
Let's see, after what happens, I typically just try to keep them on my feed if I feel like we had a really great conversation. Sometimes you don't, and that's okay. But if you really enjoyed the conversation with someone, I try to build a relationship with them. That could be sending them sending them an email. Hey, I know we talked about the fact that you really love Justin Bieber. Here is this great new song he just wrote. Did you see it? So I know it's that touch point. It's for me translating it for people who aren't natural extroverts like myself into someone who's just okay, just try and be meaningful about it. Just like you said, use the spreadsheet if you need to. But really it's kind of don't you put effort into your relationships and into your friendships? It's just kind of thinking about it that way of just, hey, I really enjoyed that conversation with someone. I would really love to just, maintain that relationship. And so that's always, again, having those touch points and just saying, hey, I saw this and thought of you. Again, maybe people think it's really odd that I do that. But I find I was hey, I saw this and I thought of you because I would do that for a friend, and so that's kind of how I try to maintain those. I don't really have a goal, for the amount of people. I really just love meeting and having genuine conversations with people. So that's kind of what I do.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you for sharing. All right, Jessica, I loved your example with the whole Louisville thing. So I'm curious though, how some of that has translated in the virtual space, because it is a little bit different, right? And we aren't able to make some of those deeper connections in person in a different location. So just kind of give us your take on the virtual networking that you've experienced in the past year.
I think that this is a really great time to kind of maintain those relationships, check in with people, hope you're doing well, hope you're staying safe, hope you're staying healthy. We have people that I've worked with now in our Texas office who I'm going to send an email and just be hey, I hope you have power, or I hope you're staying warm, and kind of generating those types of conversations. I think this is a really good time just to reach out, again, staying genuine, but just checking in with people and making sure, kind of as Haley said, treating them as your friends, not so much as just random people that you met. And at the same time, I do think that this is a really good time to practice our virtual skills, because we were all thrown into this so quickly, and that we're all now on the same page, that in 5 years, people might not extend the same type of grace to the technology issues that we are now getting, whether that be in a virtual meeting. I'm sure a lot of you saw the whole guy who was a cat on, in the courtroom. I don't know if a judge would have been that, nice about it in 5 years when we are all supposed to have had this down as they were now. It's just a glitch. We're working through it. We're getting there. And it's amazing to me that some of the people that I work with, they're oh, I don't have access to a webcam. And I'm just that's such a missed opportunity for you not to pay $30 on Amazon to get a webcam to your computer and start practicing these skills and developing, learning to develop genuine and good relationships with people over the computer. It's going to open up so many more doors for people, outside of Raleigh, because as Anna said, this is allowing us to go all over the country, allowing us to work with people or meet people in other offices or join alumni, meet alumni in other states or something like that. So I think that this has just been a good practice, a good way for everybody to be on the same page, for everybody to be understanding of, all the issues that we're going through right now, while also, laughing at the fact that there is a good chance that my dog is going to start to bark at any time. I just can't, if the UPS man shows up, it's coming. And just being aware that people also have lives. I've learned more about people in my office being stuck at home than I have when I was working in the office for 3 years, because people are so desperate for these connections that they will stick on the phone with you and just tell you the most random things about themselves that you can then use later and just, check in how's your son? I know he's a senior in high school. Is he, applying for colleges? And just like really taking advantage of these opportunities, because it's such a unique time that they're developing skills in a way that we didn't necessarily think that we would need to develop, especially so quickly.
Absolutely. Like we are literally in people's homes every day. Like it doesn't get more personal than that. So I think this is such a good time, as you said, to sort of maintain and just sort of learn different things about ourselves and about other people. Now is the best time. So I mean, we can't talk about virtual networking without talking about LinkedIn. So I know Haley's mentioned it, but Jessica, do you want to mention anything about just utilizing LinkedIn, maybe some of the tips or tricks that you've kind of taken to LinkedIn specifically?
So I will say I don't use LinkedIn that often. I'll be the first to say I do not like take advantage. Honestly, I got on there a couple months ago, and I don't know if any of y'all had Dr. Katz before she retired, but she had sent me a message like a year ago, and I responded to her, and I was just like, I'm so sorry. I do not check these messages. Like for some reason, they do not show up in my email. I have some type of like disconnect. But it is a great way. When I first graduated from state and needed a job, I found a job through LinkedIn. Just Gibbs and Sell had a post on their page, and that's how I applied for it. So, I've got a really great success rate of using it. I have dropped the ball. So, Haley.
Hey. No, but I really like the honesty, because sometimes people, they want to reach out to somebody on LinkedIn and then they get like so offended when they don't hear back, but that's just not everyone's preferred method of communication. And so it might take an email or a phone call or an introduction to be able to establish this connection. So I actually think that's a good thing that there is somebody on here that's not completely active on LinkedIn. I think that's a good example. Like you were ignoring the teacher. It was just, that's how you're preferred method.
So Haley, if you send me a request and it takes me 7 years to respond, it's really nothing personal. It's just, I am never on there unless I am just, stalking somebody who sued a client. That's usually how it goes.
You are exactly like every single one of my attorneys. We are actually currently working with all of our attorneys to use LinkedIn and how to use LinkedIn and what to do on LinkedIn. So this is for everyone. Your LinkedIn, make sure that you have, I could go through this with everyone, but just make sure you have an up-to-date professional biographic picture, and then have a header image that's like really into it now. And then make sure your headline, so that's whatever's under your name, is up to date as well. And those are the 3 brief things I will say, but that's kind of like, make sure that your LinkedIn, if you're going to be using it, is up to date. Because if you don't have a biographic picture and you don't really, and you have been using it, it's okay if you only have like 200 connections, that's what happens. But just make sure that you like actually look like a person, because there are still fake accounts just like there is on Facebook. So if you are going to be using LinkedIn, make sure that it's up to date as possible.
I agree with all those things. And also, if you are reaching out to somebody to connect, please put a note. You don't have to have LinkedIn Premium and do an end mail. You can literally just add a comment when you go to try to link with somebody. I have gotten to the point where if you don't put a comment, I'm not going to connect with you. But if you say, like, kind of like to Haley's point, if you're like, hey, I saw you in the Young Professionals Network, social, I'd love to connect. I will accept you immediately. But if you don't reference how I know you, I try to rack my brain. I don't know if I knew you from when I lived in Alabama. I don't know if I know you now. So please give me some context. That's very helpful. Colin, what about you?
I am sort of halfway in between Haley and Jessica on my utilization. So I have at times used LinkedIn a lot, like as I was graduating college, obviously looking for jobs, trying to make those connections, maintaining the connections that I made in college, all of that stuff was happening. I've been in Raleigh for almost 8 years now, so I've sort of into this. That's why I've fallen into this mixed bag. I think is that I've been in the same place and I've built a large network here, so I don't necessarily know if I feel the need in my current life to make connections broadly outside of Raleigh. But I will say I think it's incredibly important to be ready for that, because I know that I won't likely be in Raleigh forever, and so I'll need to lean on that eventually. And I'll need to focus more energy on, and fine tuning and building that up. But funny that Haley mentioned like making updates and stuff. I had made updates maybe a couple weeks ago to make sure everything was, at least accurate as far as my LinkedIn was concerned, because you also have other people who are looking for you. Like you're saying, Haley, you might have random connections from meetings you didn't even think people noticed. and they want to come and find you, and then you make that connection. That might be the only way that they have to get in touch with you too. So there's definitely a balance there. And so I echo everything Haley said about if you're going to use it, make those key updates. I love the idea of please provide some context if you make a connection, because again, some folks might not have any clue where you were from. If you're in a webinar, you might have not even been visible to them. So they might be making that connection because they had something interesting to say. I've had that experience in the leadership development program with some of the students that I was teaching in that program would reach out in some way. And I'm like, I don't know who you are. And then if it's clear, I find out later, that's cool. But yeah, add a comment. I totally agree.
Yep. And seriously, everyone, the LinkedIn alumni feature is amazing. So you just search North Carolina State University and you get a whole list of alumni, where they live, where they work, what they do. So if you're trying to identify specific people or just learn where people in your major are now working, it's extremely powerful. So I do encourage you to check that out if you are on LinkedIn and utilizing it. So well, I know we don't have a ton of time left, so I would just really like to hear from you all if there's any sort of tips, tricks, advice that you have received or that you would like to just share before we leave today. I'd love to hear your thoughts, whether it's in person, whether it's virtual, whatever it is, just around the idea of networking. You all are here for a reason. We chose you because you were a part of our network. We met you somehow in the community. And so we'd love just to hear your advice today to kind of lead us. So we'll kick it back to Colin.
Great. Yeah. So from a virtual perspective, I have like some very, very specific recommendations. They're not like the generic ones I had earlier. Try to keep your camera on. Like, I don't know how else to say that. I think in the beginning we were, at least in my realm, we were very cautious about like people might need some time to adjust depending on your background or whatever. If you're at home and you're not comfortable showing this, that, or the other, I think we've come far enough now where folks have figured out how to use virtual backgrounds. Like, I'm not on Wolf Plaza. Shocker, I'm in my bed at the moment. So I don't really, I wasn't going to pass that along, but for the sake of this example, know that I'm in my bed, but I don't have to show you that because I have my virtual background. But if you don't see my face, you might not make that same connection in the same way. And so it just kind of feels bland if you're on a Zoom call with a bunch of boxes. It's not personal at all. You're not going to make that same connection. Same thing in small spaces. I think it's more appropriate to keep your microphones on if you only have a few people, because then you can also get some of those literal like cues and sounds that you might get in an in-person interaction that you couldn't get elsewhere. There's tons of challenges with that, as we were talking before we got on this call, of like larger spaces, maybe not so much because that actually can be more distracting. But I would argue in smaller spaces, 4 or 5 people, it's wonderful to have laughter, little sounds in the background. It humanizes us. It makes it easier for us to connect in that way. Second, follow up with people afterwards. If you are interested, if you do. So Haley's already mentioned this about like seeing somebody in a meeting, but definitely follow up, whatever the appropriate way to do that is. It could be an email, it could be LinkedIn, it could be social media if that's appropriate. Whatever folks agree is appropriate or you feel like is the right thing to do, that's going to immediately pull you out from the crowd, because the vast majority of virtual engagements that I've had, there's no follow-up and then people just kind of move on. But if there's one, so therefore, because it's not very common, if somebody does it, I'm going to be like, oh, wow, this person really cares and is interested. All of a sudden, they're part of my network and I'm part of theirs. So those are my maybe 3 core pieces of advice.
I love it. And I love that they're kind of small, sort of simple things that you might not have even felt the need to address. So I thought those were wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. What about you, Jessica?
So first, kind of to bounce off what Colin said, being aware of your background is, part of it, but also being aware of your personal presentation, I think is really important, because we're at home and, as Haley said, we're business up top, casual on the bottom, that's fine. But be aware of what is up top. I've seen people get on meetings where, however it sounds, I wouldn't even walk out of the house looking like some of these people. And whether it just be an internal meeting with your coworkers, like these are still your coworkers, these are still your professional, associates, like you want to present yourself on screen the same way, if not better, than you want to in person, because you see me a lot closer here than you're going to see me across a meeting room. And I think people really are starting to kind of get casual with that. You know, presenting yourself well builds confidence. You know, I don't have to like stare at myself, kind of like Colin said, and be like, oh my God, I look like a hot mess right now. Like, how am I doing this? And it allows you to focus on other things and focus on the conversations that you're having and focus on, you know, building those relationships. And you don't want to be the person that is remembered because that girl did not brush her hair this morning. Because there are some people where that's the only thing I can think about. And so, you know, another thing I think is important for us in person, but, you know, can be done virtually, is if you don't like networking, and a lot of people really hate it, I would say the majority of people really, really, you know, avoid it, is to set a goal. You know, that's what kind of the marketing person in our firm has said. You know, if you're going to an event, set a goal that you want to meet 3 people and pass out 3 business cards. And once you hit that goal, you feel better about yourself for leaving because you've done something and you've made those connections, but you don't feel like you have to stay until the very end, and you know, your energy levels down. You don't want to be there. That starts to show on your face, it starts to show in your conversations. So if it's not something you enjoy, own it. You know, we don't all enjoy this. We're tired. We have things going on in our personal lives. We have things going on at work. We can't always devote 3 hours to happy hour. Go for an hour, meet people, make those connections, pass out 3 business cards, and then, like, you know, bounce, get out. And just being aware of yourself. It's important to know that about yourself. It's important not to be someone that you're genuinely not. And that will just come off better. You'll present yourself better that way if you just know what your end goal is.
Absolutely. I think branding, right? Whether it's in person, whether it's your hair on Zoom, but you're still reflecting yourself. So you want to make sure it's a professional version. So in respect to time, I do want to make sure, Haley, any last minute, just sort of, you've given some great advice thus far, but any sort of last minute things you want to leave us with before we jump off?
No, I think that Jessica and Colin did a really great job. If you're going to be on a Zoom call, I tried to do this, but yeah, make sure your camera's on, make sure that it's like showing this area, make sure you have a light on your face, you can kind of see it. If you have a light in the background, you can't see it, but I have a window, close it. Those are like some basic ones really quickly to just make sure that it's like a good looking, clear camera view. But that's all.
Absolutely. Y'all, I got a light on Amazon for like $17, and it's like, it makes a huge difference. I'm not like a little silhouette in the background. So anyways, well, thank you all so much for joining us.